Hi group, it's Mrs. Schaus here, ready to talk to you a little bit about stocks. I know this is stocks and bonds, but for time's sake, this is something that we're not going to address in a calculation sense. We already had some conversation about bonds. So in thinking about stocks, there are three things that we really want to consider in a calculation sense: finding gross capital gains, net proceeds, and calculations with dividends. So we'll dig right into those. First of all, stocks are typically traded in what we call round lots, and those are groupings of 100 shares. If there are fewer than 100 shares, we call that an odd lot. When the price of a stock goes up or down, no money is really made or lost by the person who owns those stock. It's only when they actually make a sale. So if they sell at a higher price, they've made some money, and if they sell at a lower price, they lose some money. When the shares are actually sold, that's when we can calculate the gross capital gain. And the gross capital gain, rather, is the money that's made from the sale prior to paying the stockbroker for making the trade for you. All right, so let's take a look at a few examples of calculating gross capital gain. L bought 400 shares of stock at $42.75 per share. She sold them at $58.50 per share. What was her gross capital gain? So again, if we're not worried about what we're paying the broker, all we have to do is take this higher number and subtract off the lower number, the $42.75, and keeping in mind that the order in which we subtract does matter, in the sense that we need to pay attention to whether we were selling at a higher or lower price. But we actually sold at a higher price here, so $58.50 minus $42.75 does give us the amount of gain that she gets from each of the shares. But she had 400 shares, so we're going to do 400 times $15.75 each. And using my calculator over here, that gives us $6,300 in gross gains. Okay, again, keeping in mind at some later point, we'll talk about needing to pay a portion to the broker. Example 2 says, 2 years ago, David bought 200 shares of stock at $12.50 per share, and today he sold them for $13.90 per share. What was his gross capital gain? Again, selling them for a higher amount, I'm going to subtract away the $12.50 there. So he made $1.40 for each of the shares, and he had 200 of those shares. So 200 times $1.40 is $280. All right, in this last one, Don bought 500 shares of stock for $32.40 per share. Yesterday he sold them for $31.20 per share. What was his gross capital gain? In this case, he's selling them cheaper than the price that he had purchased them for. So when we do that difference, he is losing $1.20 for each one of those shares that he had sold. He had 500 shares times $1.20 each. That's going to give us 600. Okay, I don't care if you put a negative sign out in front of that, or if you write $600 as a loss. But what we shouldn't do is write a negative sign and say loss, because that would be like a double negative. Okay? So why would somebody sell their stock at a price that's less than the price they originally paid? And some folks might say things like, well, it's already gone down. Maybe he's fearful it's going to continue to go down. That could be the case. But it could also just be the case that he ran into some kind of, financial emergency where he needed money now. He needed to liquidate, right? So things like that happen. We need to certainly be careful of what kind of funds we keep on hand as well, so we can try to take care of emergencies and not lose money, for that purpose or that reason. All right. In order to buy stocks, individuals, usually they get advice from a licensed stockbroker. The broker is required to make the sale for them, but they don't necessarily have to give advice. Some folks go, if you read down a little further, they go with what's called a discount broker. They charge less in a broker's fee because they don't give you advice. They only make the trade for you. Normally, the fee that a broker requires you to pay is a percentage of the sale. So whatever the value of the stocks are that you're purchasing, it's a percentage of that. All right, in thinking about the last portion that we just did in our notes, and we were finding gross capital gains, now what we're going to do is we're going to turn our attention to paying the broker, and that's going to reduce the money that's received when we actually make a sale. So once we do that, the money that we earn after the broker's fee, we call net proceeds. Kind of reminds you, using that word gross and net, of talking about our gross pay in our last unit, and then we had a bunch of deductions, and once we took those out, we found our net pay. It's kind of how this is working. It's our gross capital gains, and then we take out whatever we're paying to the broker, and what we have left over we will call our net proceeds. Keep in mind that if we're making money on investments as well, we also would pay income tax on that money earned as well. Okay, some examples. Luna asked her broker to purchase 100 shares of stock at $25.40 per share. She had to pay her broker a 1.8% broker's fee. What was the total that she paid to purchase the stock? All right, so we know that at $25.40 per share times 100 shares, well, that's going to move the decimal a couple places, that's $2,540. But that's not all she's going to pay to obtain those stocks, because she also has to pay her broker's fee. And how do we find that? Well, it is 1.8% of the total amount. So I'm going to do 2540 times 0.018 up here and see what we get. That is $45.72. So she's got to pay $45.72 to her broker for a total out-of-pocket cost of $2,585.72 to actually obtain those stocks. All right, let's take a look at the next one. Jackson bought 500 shares in a tire company at $12.50 per share. He then sold them for $15.80 per share. If he paid his broker 2% broker's fee for each transaction, then what were his net proceeds? Okay, so here we're not just talking about the purchase, but the purchase and the sale, so that we can find out how much he really made taking away that broker's fee. So let's begin with the 500 shares were purchased at $12.50 per share. So $6,250 was part of what came out of his pocket. But just as we saw in the previous example, in addition to that, he paid something to the broker. What did he pay to the broker? Let's see, 2% of this total sale. So if I do, maybe I'll do it off to the side here, 6250 times 0.02, I get $125 additional dollars. So the total that came out of his pocket is $6,375. Okay, now over here, when he makes the sale, there were 500 shares that were sold at $15.80 per share. That's $7,900. Now we've got to find the broker's fee. Again, it's 2% of this total amount. So off to the side here, I'll do $7,900 times 0.02. That gives me $158. Am I adding in 158? No, I'm subtracting off 158. Why? Because this is how much I would receive for the sale, but I have to pay the broker first. So in this case, it's actually less, right? The 158. Okay. So again, this is what he had to pay out of pocket in order to obtain the stock. This is what is left in his pocket once he sells them and pays the broker. So the difference in these two is going to be my net proceed. So 7,742 minus 6,375. That gives me $1,367 in net proceeds. Okay, let's take a look at one last problem of this type. Kelly bought 500 shares in a perfume company at $18.25 per share. She then sold them at $21.20 per share. If she paid her broker 2% broker's fee for the purchase and 1.5% for the sale, what were Kelly's net proceeds? Sometimes the fee could be different for a purchase and a sale. So let's take a look at this one. 500 shares at $18.25 is what she initially purchased. That's $9,125. But I have to add in the broker's fee. That broker's fee is, 2% of this $9,125. That's $182.50. So her total out of pocket is $9,307.50, right, for the purchase. Maybe you want to label these. I don't know. This is for the purchase. But then she sells that same 500 shares at $21.20. That's $10,600. But she has to pay part of that to the broker. So I'll find that broker's fee, but again, we're subtracting it this time. The broker's fee is a percentage of this $10,600, but this time it is 1.5%, so I'm going to multiply by 0.015 and see what we get there. $159. So if I subtract off that $159 from my $10,600, I get $10,441, and again, that's for the sale. The net proceeds are the difference in the two. So I'm going to do, I'll write it over here, net proceeds. 10,441 minus 9,307.50. That gives me $1,133.50. All right. All right, that's it for our gross capital gains and our net proceeds. Let's take a look at a different form of income. So it says up here, another way that individuals make money from stock is through dividends. That is, there's an annual amount that stockholders may receive for their ownership of the business, right? They own a portion of the business, and therefore they might receive a portion of the profits, right? There's a board of directors for each corporation that sets the dividend amount annually, and that's per share. But it is important to note that not all corporations pay dividends. Why would that be? Well, quite frankly, some corporations aren't making a profit, so they don't have any profits to share. But there are other corporations who are making a profit, and they choose to have the dividends be zero because they are trying to invest in and better the company. Some folks might say, well, I only want stock in company where they're going to pay a dividend. But the dividends can be, just a few cents per, share of stock to, substantially more than that. When folks purchase stocks that don't pay out a dividend, they're looking for a company that's going to increase in value, and therefore the shares of stock will increase, and at some point they'll sell those shares, and that's the way in which they'll make their profit. Okay. Also, dividends are typically paid out quarterly. They're reported annually, but they are paid out typically quarterly. All right, so some examples of that form of pay. Brian owns 800 shares of Cool Cola. The company pays an annual dividend of 22 cents per share. How much is Brian's quarterly dividend check? All right, so he's got 800 shares, and he's going to get 22 cents for each one of those. That gives us a total of $176, but that is annually. So if he wants to know how much one of his quarterly checks is going to be, we'll divide by 4 since there are 4 quarters in the year. $44. Now, it should be noted too that some folks will take those dividend pieces and they will just have it reinvested back into that company. Okay. Our last one here, Jesse. Let me get that light to come back on. There we go. Jesse owns 100 shares of Pizza Palace stock, which pays an annual dividend of $1.06 per share, as well as 300 shares of Clever Clothing, which pays an annual dividend of 35 cents per share. What will be the amount of her combined quarterly dividend check for these stocks? All right, well, we're going to do the 100 at $1.06. All right, that's going to move the decimal 2 places, so this is 106. And we've got 300 shares at 35 cents per stock. That gives us a total of 105. And we can add those two together, so that would give us 211. But remember that that is annually, and it wants to know her combined quarterly dividend check. So once again, we're going to divide by 4. She would receive $52.75 quarterly. Okay, so that is it for our calculations geared around income that is earned through stocks. I'm going to give you guys some exercises to try. I hope it goes well. Of course, we'll talk about questions that you have in our next Google Meet. I hope it's a great day, folks. Talk to you soon.